Hello and welcome to my next video. Today I'll show you how I draw traditionally, put it into Photoshop and finish digitally. Hello and welcome back. As you can see, I've drawn Bear and myself with dip pen and ink on paper. Then I just took a quick snapshot with my cell phone and imported that into Photoshop. And I've added a new layer, which I set to multiply, and used a watercolor brush from Gret Brushes. I'll leave a link in the description below. I like his brushes. And I'm doing more or less the same what I would do with watercolors. I'm starting with the background here, as I usually do, and leave the details for later, which is something that really makes sense when you think about it, but it's technically not really necessary when you're working digitally because you don't really have to wait for paint to dry. I used this image, which is part of my Bear subscription service, and this was the image from the 17th, 2 days ago. What you're missing out on when you're just viewing the image is the dialogue between Bear and I chose specifically this image to work digitally because the dialogue that we both had on that day was fairly important, I think, and really something that I wanted to put into frame. So I have a composition that is quite a bit unusual if you would think about it. I have lots of room around them. I have a non-specified background. You can see that later that it is rain still coming down, and we are both very close together. We have our heads inclined towards each other, and I'm looking at him and he's bowing down a little bit, lending me his ear, so to speak. And we're deep into our conversation and very focused. As you can see, we have both arms full with grocery bags, these little green plastic bags. I wanted to use the digital workspace here because when I add the rain later on, that is something that I can't really do when I'm working on paper. Of course I can paint rain on paper, but the thing is that you have no room for error, because by then you have invested so much time into putting up everything that is there is no Command Z. There is no undo functionality for watercolors. You can correct a few things more or less visibly, but something like rain is something that you really have to prepare for and lay out in advance, and have to really think about how you want to do with it. While when you're working digitally, you just add a new layer, you're using the rain brush and choosing the kind of rain that you want to use, a light drizzle or a heavy downpour. And then you toy around with the layers, as you can see later on. And since I'm trying to keep the time that I take for each of these daily Bear images to around the 20-minute mark, at least no longer than 30 minutes, that is something that I could only do digitally. So what you also can do digitally is paint outside the lines, so to speak. you don't really have to think about that because you can always erase it later. You can put a new layer on top. You can then do everything. And I think painting digitally is on the one hand it's great, but on the other hand it's leading to a sloppy style of working, because you get used to it that you can just press undo and then that was that, and that you can just choose a new layer, and that you can just with the touch of a button switch colors, and you don't have to start all over again, and which is something that you would have to do if you work traditionally. But it does have its place and its moments, and for something like this it's really great. You can just as you can see here, choose what kind of rain you want to use, what kind of color you want to use, how heavy it's going to be. You can toy around with the splashes, and just really something that would take me ages to do the traditional way, and just takes me mere minutes to set up digitally. I mean, this is sped up by 300%, this whole thing's. It's not just like it took me 5 minutes as this video does, but it frees up a lot of time that you would use for trial and error in the analog world. So I'm pretty much done here. I've toyed with the colors, I've played around with hue and saturation and light and darkness, shadows and highlights. And I'm adding a small vignette just to pull even more focus into the rather intimate setting that we're in. And we're both so focused on what we're talking about that we don't even seem to notice how it is raining and how we're getting wet, and we don't really care about that at all. So I think this is a perfect example of what's the best of both worlds. I do like to start out on paper with a dip pen and just put it into Photoshop. I don't like to start from scratch in Photoshop. But I think this is where digitally really shines, and where it's giving you the most options and doesn't cramp your style. Thank you for watching. See you next week. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell so you know when new videos are coming out. See you.